You see, this is my life. It always will be. There's nothing else. Just us. And the cameras. And those wonderful people out there in the dark.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Out There in the Dark. My name is Tom Alexander, and joining me as always is
Azed Majid and his son Django, who's making noise upstairs. That's my son Django. He has autism, but he's loud sometimes, but he's magnificent. So
and he's having fun. He's a happy
having
guy.
fun. Yes,
Can't
like,
wish for anything better.
Exactly. So what's on? What are we talking about today on this show?
Well, Azed, I'm glad you asked me that.
Okay.
Today we're going to do a new series called Recently Watched.
Recently watched.
And it's pretty simple. We're just going to talk about
Is this about you like stalking people when you're like watching through their?
It can be.
Okay.
If that's what you want.
All right. Well, I'm calling the police.
Okay.
And then we'll deal
I'll
with
see you
that.
later. I'm going to run.
Okay.
And so we're going to just talk about some stuff that we've seen. There's a lot of stuff that we've seen individually, but there's a few things that we both have seen that we can dive into.
Yep.
So,
Indeed.
but before we do that, we lost one of the great Canadian actors, Donald Sutherland, recently. And so...
coincidentally, we're recording this on Canada Day.
Oh,
and
that's true.
If you're from Canada, Donald Sutherland just has a special place for most Canadians. He's very Canadian, but he also kind of went much further than, it's a typical Canadian
He's
story.
internationally recognized as...
Yeah, now it's kind of like, this person's Canadian, that person's Canadian. But back in the 70s, it was like rare that people would talk about Canada even, but... he seemed to be able to cross those lines, and he just was just like, I don't know. For me, he was always like a favorite. If I saw him in a movie, I was immediately like, oh, Donald Sutherland.
So this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, going to be, or at least the performance is going to be good, right? So I guess we have, I guess both of us have some of our favorite Donald Sutherland movies to talk about a little bit. What are some of yours, Tom?
Well, I recently rewatched as a way of kind of memorializing him. I rewatched MASH.
Oh, yeah, the Robert Altman.
1970, I think, or something like that.
1970, yeah.
Yeah, which was wonderful. It was just a hilarious... I couldn't believe how funny it was.
He was so, like, sarcastic and...
him and Elliot Gould were, like, the perfect, almost like a Marx Brothers-ish duo, causing havoc and anarchy on the MASH unit.
Yeah, and it was sort of like that 60s ethos. They were almost like they embodied that kind of hippie, like rebellious kind of nature, right?
Yeah.
And that was the first time I think, sort of characters like that in a kind of big mainstream movie, were like. They sort of embodied it without being hippies. They were like doctors, right?
Yeah.
So like they're
doctors in the 1950s, right? This is the Korean War.
Exactly, but but they still have that kind of like anti-establishment kind of hedonistic
it was
pranking.
It was pure Robert Altman, right?
Yeah,
it was his first masterpiece, I would say. I mean, he'd done a lot of TV and a few films, but this was the first breakout film of his to be such a huge box office hit.
Yeah, absolutely. And Altman is one of those very interesting. At some point, we should do a whole show on Altman because he's
idiosyncratic,
super
really...
all over the place in many ways, good and bad, right? But yeah, that MASH was definitely, I think, one of the ones that really made him into a big star. Him and Elliot Gould, right?
And also like his stock company of actors, right? Like Rene Auberjonois, John Schuck, Tom Skerritt's great in it,
right? Henry Gibson.
Henry Gibson's not in MASH.
Oh, he's not in that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but yeah, he was great in Nashville.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, for me, I think. Some of my favorites are, well, we talked a little bit about Clute, but Clute was like, so Clute, everybody knows Clute for Jane Fonda because she's sort of like, she won the award and she was great in it. But it's actually Clute is actually the main character is played by Donald Sutherland. He's the detective who's looking for the serial killer, right? And he was quite good in that. But I think the first movie I saw it much later. I didn't see it in the 70s, but the one that I think of a lot with him is Don't Look Now, which is like, I think has become sort of this like horror classic now,
Absolutely.
right? And yeah, it's a terrifying film, and he's great in it, right? And that's the thing. He could play sort of sarcastic, silly kind of characters, but then be very, very good as a leading man, as a very serious actor, right?
Yeah, and he gave like amazing cameo appearances in films, like this mysterious government staffer in JFK who kind of pushes Costner in the right direction. Not a great movie in my opinion, but his scene is probably the best scene in the film.
An interesting movie for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, stylistically, but yeah, I know what you mean. And he was also the dad in Ordinary People, which was a huge big movie when it came out, and it won Best Picture. And whether I don't know if I'd say it's a good movie.
I love it. I think it's genuinely good.
Ordinary People is
cheese,
is
but
sort
it's
of like an after school special, but we're like a little more serious, right? It's whatever. I enjoy it too.
Scott
I can't help it, but I
definitely
think it's like one of those like horrible guilty pleasures where you're like, this is a dumb movie.
You know what? I haven't seen it in a long time. Maybe I should rewatch it.
It's pretty cheesy,
but it's such good cheese.
It is good cheese. It's delicious. It's like
Kraft
stinky
singles.
French cheese. Yeah, and then he was also. I think younger listeners to our show would know him from Hunger Games because he's President Snow, right?
Whatever. Yeah.
And people know him from.
And he's pretty genuinely menacing. I mean, he's very effective.
He is.
He always is.
He also, people don't know this about Donald Sutherland. Of course, his son is Kiefer Sutherland. And the thing is, like, that family in Canada is really...
it's royalty.
It's kind of, political royalty in some ways because Donald Sutherland was married to Shirley Douglas, who's the daughter of Tommy Douglas, who was the founder of the NDP here in Canada. And that's the most socialist leaning government or political party that we have, and so nationalized medicine, the whole thing comes from Tommy Douglas, right? So there's this connection from Donald Sutherland to Tommy Douglas, and it's like, well, these are bedrock Canadians, right? So now here's a little personal story about Donald Sutherland for me. So many, many years ago, when I first came out of school, I had a friend who started a wedding videos business. And so I worked with him for a while, and he kind of grew pretty big at one point. And one day he came to us and said, we're going to be shooting Kiefer Sutherland's wedding. And this was, I don't know which wife this was for Kiefer. I think, whatever. She was like, I don't even remember who it was. It was like, she was like kind of like I think she was an exotic dancer. Anyway, so we went and shot the wedding, and it was like Donald Sutherland was there with his wife and his kids, and Forrest Whitaker was there, and lots of Hollywood people and stuff like that. So I actually got to meet Donald Sutherland and actually point my camera at him at one point.
Oh,
so
wow.
There you go.
Do you remember I worked for the same video company for like 10 minutes?
I don't remember that. You did?
I did. Omar got me the job.
Oh, you were editing there?
I edited one wedding video terribly. Did a terrible job.
Where, was that when they were on Atlantic?
Yep. Yeah,
so I wasn't still there then at that point.
I don't remember seeing you in the building.
Yeah.
But I remember being I think I just set up, I can't do this. I'm terrible at it.
Yeah,
and I
well,
know it,
you
so
were
thank
smarter
you.
than I was. I did I did hundreds of weddings, I think. Yeah. And they're the worst. Anyway.
The worst. So, yeah.
Fucking hate weddings. Anyway.
Sutherland, yeah. Incredible.
Yeah. It was
probably the greatest body of work of any Canadian actor.
Yeah, probably. Now, if you had to pick one movie that you think people haven't seen, or is a lesser known or whatever movie with Donald Sutherland in it, what would it be?
I remember I saw it when I was a kid, and I thought it was good and kind of thrilling. Was the spy thriller called Eye of the Needle, which was made in the 1980s.
Yep.
And I thought that was
he
played a very creepy.
He plays a spy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say that's a good choice. I don't know how many people have seen Don't Look Now. I guess quite a few.
Yeah, definitely see Don't Look Now. That one's great. Yeah. So the one I really love, and I don't know how many people maybe have seen it, but it's 6 Degrees of Separation, which is based on a famous play. It was I think Will Smith's one of his earliest.
Probably his first feature film.
Yeah, and it was the first time that you saw him serious, right, in a serious role, and. It's a great movie. It's like really well done. Stockard Channing and Donald Sutherland. They played this like wealthy New York. He's an art dealer, right? And they're Upper West Side, sort of Manhattan. And then this black kid comes into their life and kind of wows them, and it becomes much more very, very entangled, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great film.
It is a great film, and so definitely try to find that one.
You mentioned Day of the Locust earlier as well when we chatted.
Oh yeah, so yeah, there's a movie from the 70s called Day of the Locust. It's based on a novel by Nathaniel West, and yeah, Karen Black is in it. It's all about Hollywood in the 30s, I believe. But he plays this character called Homer J. Simpson, right? And I'm not sure about this, but I always thought, well, that's got to be a direct lift because Matt Groening, all the characters are named after movies or TV or something, right? Like Apu, right, is named after the world of Apu. But it's really bizarre because Dave the Locust, the Homer J. Simpson character at the end, this is a spoiler alert, but what makes it so creepy is that he literally stomps a child to death at the end of the movie.
Jeez, I've never seen this movie.
So it's like, oh, what's Matt Groening trying to say here, right? But
well, it was controversial with The Simpsons when they'd show him strangling his own kid.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think I think that's a reference that he's doing on purpose. I'm not sure, but anyway, 6 Degrees of Separation and Day of the Locust are two great ones. Okay, farewell, Donald Sutherland. You were great.
Yep. R.I.P.
Why couldn't it have been Kiefer? Just kidding. I'm kidding. Jeez, quiet. All right, so we're gonna move on to movies that we've recently watched. Mm-hmm. So which one do you want to do first?
Well, why don't we talk about Hitman?
Okay, yes. We both just watched Richard Linklater's new movie called Hitman.
I saw it a little while ago.
Okay.
I saw it before it came out.
I just watched it yesterday and the day before yesterday.
Wow.
Because I watched it twice. And
it must have made an impression on you.
I loved it. I thought it was so great. Like, how do I even start? I think, like, first of all, the whole premise is amazing. Like the idea that there really aren't no such things as hitmen, right? That's all just fantasy, right? Because this character played by
Glenn Powell,
exactly. Who I didn't even know who he was. I mean,
he's been around a bit. Yeah,
Glenn Powell is. What have you seen? I haven't seen him in anything, so I don't know what he's from. But
I noticed him in Hidden Figures, which was about the female black scientist.
Never saw that. Okay,
so he plays an astronaut, and he's just very charismatic. It's a very short scene, but I remember thinking, oh, that guy's kind of cool.
Well, I mean, this is a star-making performance in this movie. I mean, he is just so likable. And so,
I mean, his breakout was kind of the modern cinema masterpiece known as Top Gun Maverick. So, he was in that.
That's too bad.
Anyway,
I think this is one of my favorite movies of the year, like so far.
His other big one was a rom-com called Anyone But You with Sydney Sweeney. That was a huge hit.
Oh, that's him?
Yeah.
Oh, well, this is a much better performance. I haven't seen that movie, but I have a feeling this is better. But this movie is fantastic. I mean, it's really about this kind of very like, this kind of nerdy professor kind of guy. This guy who's a professor of literature, and he, gives these very earnest kind of lectures and very, very sweet, nice kind of guy. But he, on the side, he's working with the police because he's good at electronics, and he's working with them doing these sting operations, these surveillance operations. But he's the guy who sits in the van and just listens, right? But what it is that they are setting up people who are trying to hire contract killers to kill somebody that's in their way, and they get an agent to pose as a hitman, and then they record it all. So, and the whole point is that he's saying, sort of the point is that this doesn't actually exist in the real world, right? People
think it does.
People think it does because of movies, but who's going to spend who's going to kill somebody for you after they've met you for like 5 minutes, and then for like what, $5,000, they're going to like put their whole like future, like go to jail for life. You know what I mean? So he's like, that's a fascinating premise to begin with. And then the idea that therefore it's all about what is a believable narrative, right? And how you can turn yourself into a story almost, right? And it becomes so much about that concept of identity being a construct, because he, through all these different mishaps, this nerdy professor guy, Glenn Powell, he has to now become the pretend hitman.
Yeah.
And he is amazing at it. And it's like a shock to everybody because he's like so mild-mannered, and it's such an against the type, right?
But what's great about the movie too is that those themes around sense of self are reflected in his actual lessons in his philosophy
Absolutely,
class that he
yeah,
teaches at college.
exactly. He's teaching all about self.
So it's kind of interesting to see that, and then his students will witness him, because as the film continues, he almost subtly starts taking on qualities of this like super cool hitman guy that he's created.
Yeah, well, what's really fascinating,
and then it's like
what's great about it is that like he takes on this role where he says, well, I want whoever is contacting him for a hit, he wants to cater his hitman to that particular person, right? So you see this wonderful montage of just different characters, like and costumes and stuff that he puts on.
My favorite was the like German Dieter type.
That was my favorite too. Yeah, the German Dieter guy was good, but also the like guy who's doing skeet shooting. Oh
yeah,
like it's so many different kind of types, and they're kind of all references too. Like there's one that's very American Psycho. It's almost a ripoff, right?
Yep.
Where he says the same lines and everything, right? So it's very much about film and performance and acting and construction of a world and yourself in that world in a way that works for you, right? And there's something very philosophically interesting. Like, are you essentially you? And what does that mean? Because like there's Gary, the nerdy professor, right, and then there's Ron, who has this amazingly torrid, very successfully done romance. Like in the movie, it's very believable, very hot.
It's pretty hot.
I mean, the woman in it is just super gorgeous. I'd never seen her before either.
No.
I can't even remember her name.
But there's all these great other characters.
Yeah.
There's colleagues at the
but
police
she's
station.
Great. Like she's amazing because like the whole thing becomes, so this is my read on it. It's like so much about the construction of identity and who are you, and if you're pretending to be somebody else, isn't that you too? And that's why there's this bleeding that happens between the Gary and the Ron character in the movie. And at one point some of his female students, one turns to the other and goes, when did our professor get hot? It's like, yeah, like he's starting to take on those. So it's almost like this concept of identity is so flimsy. There is no real basis to identity. It's all what you construct, and you can and you do, like, we all take from various sources, and this to be
especially
true.
In the age of social media, where we completely construct a persona of ourselves that's maybe at best tangentially related to who we actually are.
Sure, your avatar, right? Whatever, your social brand,
Yeah.
But and maybe some of us do that better than others. I mean, I'm from another generation. It's like it's not easy for me. It's like embarrassing, right? So and people.
Well, I didn't want to tell you, but
everything I do is embarrassing. No, but that's what made this movie so great. On top of that, the movie is a throwback to, and it's brilliant the way he does it. It's both a screwball comedy and a film noir. And it has the tropes of both of those genres, which is fascinating because they both are genres that coexist at the same time. Generally 30s, 40s, and seem to be kind of flip sides of each other in terms of a period of time in our history where there was a genre or particular genres that we don't really have anymore, except as kind of pastiche, right? So, what I loved about what he did was he used the elements of screwball that really spoke to this idea of something like the amorality of behavior and the sort of the pursuit of something outside of the rules, right, and all that kind of stuff. It's very anarchic, right? Screwball comedy, and film noir, which is all about deception, masks, manipulation,
and that other police officer character is very much part of that too.
He's great. He's great. Oh my god, I love that guy. I can't remember his name either. Oh my god. I'm gonna pull up the cast because this is not fair to them. So just to go through the cast here quickly. So the main female love interest in it is Adria Arjano or Ariano. I don't know how to pronounce her name. She plays Maddie, amazing character, beautifully played. And then there's Austin Emilio, who plays Jasper, who's great.
Sleazy,
He's just amazing. And then there's what's her name from she's great too.
Yeah, from Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec, exactly.
Retta, yeah. Oh, she's hilarious.
Retta, exactly. Yeah, she's really funny in it. Everybody's really good in this movie, and again, it's that combination of it's extremely funny, but it's also like dark. It's got very dark. It reminded me a little bit of Barry that way, although Barry's darker. But it had that same.
Yeah, it's a good comparison.
Yeah, it has the same kind of tone thing. Like there's a part where, like this guy Gary, he's just pretending to be a hitman. He's never actually killed anybody, right? And with her, he meets her, Maddie, because she wants to have her husband killed because she's being abused by her husband. That's her story anyway. And then he falls in love with her and basically tells her, don't go through with it. Just, leave him and get your own life. And then she starts pursuing him, and then they start this amazing romance, right? But, she's like, who is she? Like, you don't know. And is she also putting on some kind of act? Because then she starts doing very double indemnity kind of things. There's a insurance policy and the whole thing, right? So, it's like these two guys, what they love about each other is they're both game players, right? They're both kind of like constructing these personas, right? And it's great because they're even in their meeting. It's amazing because they start improvising with each other, right?
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, you're good," and she says, "Yeah, you're good too." So there's a lot. It just the metaphor is that of playing, which is a metaphor for acting, and then the movie becomes very much about movies, right? And the construction that we take from movies, because I've taken behaviors and lessons from movies before.
Sure.
And even different characters, like people will, unconsciously pick up maybe, aspects of, I don't know, if you're like a typical, guy watcher, maybe somebody like Harrison Ford or whoever, right?
Yeah.
But, you may pick up, bits of Woody Allen or other people like, just people you admire, right? So we're very susceptible to cultural influence, right? And that's, I think the movie's got that kind of going for it as well. So hilarious, brilliant, very, very amazing characters really successful love story, and brilliant ending too, because the ending almost seems like it's like, it reminded me a lot of the ending of King of Comedy, where it's like, wait a minute, is this actually happening, or is this more part of the because it's like perfect parents now and perfect family, you know? It's like, wait a minute, is this another construction, right?
Well, probably it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you got a lot more out of the film than I did. I liked it as well. Listening to you talk about it, it sounds like I should rewatch it. For me, it felt like minor Linklater. I appreciate it, again, the comedy, the really novel premise, which is actually loosely based on a true story.
It is. The guy was real.
And but to me, like, I did feel it felt a little slight to me. I didn't think it was great filmmaking that I've seen from Linklater before. That you're right about the love story, except I had trouble buying the actual premise that they would go along with this, that they would risk so much for this. But
I never found that.
But having said that, no, it's well worth watching. It's a lot of fun. It's good.
I think it's definitely a much needed kind of film,
and it's smart. It's really smart.
It's smart, and it's also just it's super fun to watch, because I mean, this Glenn Powell's performance is probably one of my favorites,
and he co-wrote it.
Oh, I didn't know that. It's great. Yeah. It's really clever. It's really smart, and it's definitely, like, I like when like, one thing I've always liked about Richard Linklater is he's hit and miss for me, but, you know, when he's always experimenting with form, and form is something that most people don't fuck around with too much. You know, people are like 3-act, thing, it's got to do that. It's very structured, right? And that can be a little boring after, like, it gets a little too, like, okay, I know what's going to happen next.
He takes chances.
You see the gun in the first act, it's going to go off in the third act. That kind of thing, right?
Chekhov's gun?
It's Chekhov, yeah, exactly. So, but, it's like, I like what he does, which is that he always infiltrates a story from the formal aspect, right? Where you're, so I know what you're talking about in terms of it seems slight, right?
Exactly, but there's a lot of depth that you're speaking to that
I think it was and I saw an interview, and I'll send it to you actually, Tom, because it's amazing. I saw an interview with Richard Linklater where he was talking about this movie, and he had a notebook of his, like, influences. So number 1, What's Up, Doc? Okay, and number 2, Double Indemnity, of course.
For sure.
But number 3, The Lady Eve.
Ah.
Right? And then he talked about Howard Hawks a lot, because he said, like, the Glenn Powell character in his professor role is supposed to be a little bit more like the absent-minded Professor Cary Grant kind of character, right? So I think if you watch it again with all of that in mind, like looking at, I think he's like us. He's a total cinephile, and so he had and if you're talking What's Up, Doc, I'm like already in your camp, right? I'll have sex with you. But
Linklater is an incredible filmmaker. He's a long, incredible history. I mean, we've released a few of his films too, and most notably Boyhood, I think, which is perhaps my favorite of his films. Yeah. Okay. Well,
I wouldn't say that, but it's a good one. But he's made a lot of great movies, and he like, again, think about one of his most famous ones, which is Dazed and Confused, right? Again, it's very much a formally odd movie, because it's just like people hanging around in a bush party, right?
I remember Omar and I going to see Slacker, his first film.
I saw Slacker
at the Bloor Cinema, I think. Yeah,
it's the same thing. It's like he's never a 3-act kind of like guy, right? And there's fascinating things in all of his movies. Like there's like I think a lot of his movies do kind of infiltrate the concept of narrative and how stories are told and how they work. And I think this one, like you said, they keep cutting back to him as a professor giving a talk, and every time he's talking about something, it's relevant to what's happening
in the film.
Yeah. Right? And so
it's a commentary track almost.
He's talking about
right?
the id, the superego, right? And the ego, and he's explaining, how they work and stuff. And it's like, clearly this has to do with his own Ron character coming out and the other characters. Because, and what's great is I love the way it's very realistic how the other characters are like, oh, shit, Gary, wow, we thought you, how did you do that, right? Like,
but his colleagues are talking about how, like, hot and sexy he was.
Yeah, but not him, but the character Ron. Yeah. They're like, I'd definitely take your sloppy seconds on Ron. Anyway, so that's Hitman. I highly, highly recommend Hitman. I think it's definitely super genius, to be honest. Okay, next.
Should we talk about Furiosa?
Okay.
Yeah. This is the prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, one of my favorite action movies of all time.
It's a good one.
It's a good one. This one, not quite at that level. It's, there's a lot of incredible action sequences. It looks amazing. And it's great to see how, like Fury Road was a really great feminist action film. This one shows the background of that, and it retains those themes. But to me, it felt like it kept falling a little short on every level. From Anya Taylor-Joy is fine, but she's no Charlize by any stretch. And it just felt It felt messier. It wasn't as tightly. I don't know. It didn't work for me quite as well, but it's a thrilling film to watch.
Yeah.
And I love Tom Burke, who plays the sort of road warrior type guy who kind of shows her the ropes. He's a great actor, and he's really cool in the movie.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, I don't know if I think that it's technically there's anything wrong with the movie. I think it's just a different. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Right. I really did. I thought it was. I mean, Fury Road is also fantastic, but this one. So this is the problem. One of the problems with Mad Max, right? Is that it's not like you got 4 movies in 10 years, right? You got 4 movies in 30 years, right? So it's a difficult one because you have to wait so long. I mean, the original Road Warrior is from like 82 or something, 83. So, and the original Mad Max is from the 70s, right? So you're dealing with the whole world and I wouldn't even put Mad Max in there. I'd put starting with Road Warrior, right?
I loved Mad Max. When I was a kid and I saw Mad Max on TV, that was like, wow.
Oh, I'm not saying I don't like Mad Max. I'm just saying just the similarities between the world that Miller is building seems to start more in Road Warrior.
That's true. Because Mad Max is almost like at the cusp of an apocalypse.
It's like before it all happened.
It's starting to happen.
Exactly. It's starting to happen. It's more like regular bikers and stuff. It doesn't have that same crazy, steampunk thing that.
No.
Yeah.
But there's anarchy in the air.
There's anarchy in the air, but I'm just saying, in terms of Road Warrior, Thunderdome, which is average, but then Fury Road and now Furiosa, if you take those 4 together, right, Furiosa is the missing link for me for a lot of the backstory, right? And I think the way it tells the story in a very kind of almost Dickensian sort of way, is it's something that, because the one thing about these movies, which is they're both their amazing strength, and perhaps this movie remedies something that was a weakness, is that they're very much almost silent movies, right? There's very little dialogue in these movies.
Well,
right?
This one had a lot more dialogue.
Well, that's what I just said. But, this one maybe remedies that.
It
right?
didn't work for me. I liked it more silent. One of the things that got on my nerves was Chris Hemsworth's villain character. There seems to be some kind of weird trend where the bad guys never stop talking. Yeah. They have to be kind of freaky, and they never shut up.
Yeah. I liked him. I thought he was funny. I thought he was memorable for sure. And I liked the whole father figure kind of doubling that was going on there was really great, and the fact that she rejects both, right? And so the feminist sort of seed that's sort of in Fury Road, you really see the origin stories of that happening in context of the it's the first time. So here's the thing. I think that Furiosa is an answer to the hyper masculine, glorified violence of Road Warrior. I love Road Warrior, and I don't care what it means.
Everybody loves Road Warrior.
Yeah, I love Road Warrior, but it is, if you're going to look at it, it is a very toxic masculine film, because what you're getting off on is the high chase car rides, the crazy, killings, and the
Are there any female characters in Road Warrior? I don't even remember.
If there are, I don't remember either. I mean, so it's very very much about boys and their cars, right? Great movie, I love it. And Fury Road sort of seemed to kind of take that and then kind of change it, right? Yeah. But you come into the middle of something, right? And this movie goes back to the very, very beginning of where that movie starts.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what one of the things I liked about Furiosa was you get more of the matriarchy that she comes from.
Yeah.
And so you see, and again, as you mentioned, the patriarchy of the father figure doubling is so messed up.
Yeah.
And, there's this great action sequence at the beginning where her mother is tracking her as she's been kidnapped by these guys. And
the way she, like right from the very beginning, is a fighter, right? So that's an interesting thing too, because she comes from a matriarchal or so-called, matriarchal society, but she knows how to survive, right? Mm-hmm. So she's already quite skilled, because when she's even
more so than the guys.
When she's being kidnapped, she knows to bite the fuel line, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's this kind of like there's a lot more about maleness, like a patriarchal kind of maleness, and the kind of the sense of ridiculousness that they have with their kind of games that they're playing in the desert, and trying to like dominate, whereas she's trying to get back to the green place. So they already know that there's a place, she already knows that there's this place where it's like a beautiful haven, so it's an alternative to what we've been presented. Something about the whole Road Warrior series is that it can be nihilistic, right?
This one doesn't feel nihilistic.
I'm saying the whole series. So this one, just to be straight, I'm saying this one seems to answer some of the other things that I had some issues with the previous movies, right? Because the green space seems to offer some bit of hope that was not there in the Road Warrior. There's no green space in the Road Warrior.
Well, in Fury Road, the green space is destroyed. And she goes back to it.
Exactly. So, this is and that makes it doubly ironic, because it ends. Furiosa actually ends right where Fury Road starts, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
With her taking
the next shot.
Yeah, taking the women who are being basically held as, breeders, right? I loved Furiosa. I thought it was I like that it was. I don't want to see the same thing again and again and again, which is like 2 hours of amazing, car chases. But I like that it was a little bit more slow, and it took time to kind of like develop the characters a bit more. I thought Anna Taylor-Joy was amazing. I thought she was great. Right. I really, I thought it was a perfect end piece. I don't know whether he should do more. I have no idea about that.
So many sequels or prequels or whatever the hell they are, just feel like remakes of the last film. This one does not.
That's the good thing about it.
Exactly.
I think.
Yeah.
I'd have to see it again to see whether or not I think it's like as good as I'm saying it is. Because Did
you see it in the theater?
I did. I actually saw it in the theater with what do you call that thing? With the seats that move,
Oh my God, the D-box?
The D-box, yeah.
Wow, that would drive me insane.
No, it was good. I really enjoyed it, because you can go all the way back, right? Like, and then it was it was cheesy, but it was fun. So I would say definitely worth checking out. It's no Hitman, but yeah. Okay, move on.
Well, yeah, I guess one more to talk about was, my son who's 20 years old. He's a huge horror movie fan. And
I wonder why.
Well, it's funny because I've been trying to get him into horror movies as a teenager, and he just...
Is that why he's so traumatized?
Yeah, and destroyed his his psyche is demolished.
It's part of your like sick experiment.
Destroyed another person.
Destroy some people.
But he was always really chicken shit. He would be scared of like his own shadow. And then I don't know why, but he watched Midsummer one day. And he loved it.
Right.
And so and then now he watches horror movies all the time. No, it was Hereditary.
Ugh.
That he loved. And then I said, well, you should see his other film, Midsummer. And then he loved that one even more. So anyway, A24 is doing this program where they're re-releasing some of their films on IMAX. So we saw the director's cut of Midsummer on IMAX. Which was quite visceral experience.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to see that guy's movies on IMAX.
People were leaving. People were like,
you were
running out of the theater. So spoiler alert, but I'm sure
everybody's seen it.
Yeah. So at one point, all of a sudden, there's this thing where these elderly people jump off a cliff and are mutilated on their way down, and people just almost ran out of the theater. Two people went through the emergency exit by to the left side of the screen. It was like amazing to see.
I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so. Midsummer is I'll tell you something. That guy, Ari Aster, he has a very enviable quality, which is that his movies feel like his movies, and they have a particular kind of atmosphere that it's not easy to put your finger on why that there's a creeping. He's a very visceral filmmaker. At least for me.
Absolutely.
I feel it like with this guy, Ari Aster. I definitely for me, I usually don't feel this way because again, it's like there's usually standard kind of horror tropes and horror movies where you're like, okay, I know it's scary, whatever. I know what's going to happen. Not with him. His atmosphere is so chilling. And you don't know exactly why.
You never know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, and then when something does happen, it's fucking terrifying. Like in Midsummer, that scene where the sex scene is just fucking terrifying. And then of course, the ending is, I was like shocked, Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in Midsummer that it's queasy, because it's like you both find it attractive at first that there's this commune kind of, with all these, like, it's all bright and sunny and everybody's wearing robes and, it's like, but it just gets so gross, like after a while, like the feeling is just like, I'm trapped, like get out, need to get out. Anyway, it's a terrifying movie. Yeah. I think he's one of the strongest horror directors of all time because I never get scared by horror movies. Rarely. Only The Exorcist, right? And Hereditary.
Yeah, Hereditary is terrifying.
Yeah, I actually had some problems sleeping. Yeah. Because I kept looking in the corner of my room to see if she was up there. Yeah.
Ceiling.
Yeah, it was truly terrible. So I mean, I'm sure there are people, horror aficionados out there who are going, "Oh my god, you stupid," whatever. And I'm supposed to know some other B film guy, but I love his movies. I think they're great. Yeah. I even like Beau is Afraid. I like that one.
I haven't seen that one yet. Yeah. I gotta watch it. Yeah, I mean, what's great about Midsummer to me is this idea that the Florence Pugh character, who's gone through this traumatic event where her sister committed this murder-suicide of her parents, she feels completely alienated from her douchebag boyfriend who drags her along out of pity to Sweden. And, and the style of the film is very folk horror. Like if you think of The Wicker Man or, that kind of British cinema back then. Where
very Wicker Man for sure.
It's very Wicker Man, which similarly is like you watch it and it seems kind of bucolic, but very creepy and very weird. But you're like, is this a horror movie? Is this a musical? Is this a comedy?
Is this Brigadoon?
And then suddenly the last 10 minutes of The Wicker Man is pretty much the most terrifying thing you've ever seen.
Yeah, except the Nicolas Cage version.
Yeah, we're not talking.
The bees.
We're not going to talk. Not the bees.
Not the bees.
But Florence Pugh becomes part of this community. And she's repulsed by it at first and can't believe what she's seeing. But at least there's something about it where they take this trauma of death and embrace it in obviously a very psychotic way. They're murderers and horrible people.
Torturers. Yeah.
But
it's all done in
she
this
feels like she belongs now.
Well,
it's kind of about this how we take trauma and we make it part of our lives in a way. And this community has taken trauma and made it part of their lives and embraced it as a way of coping.
That's interesting. Yeah, right. So like it becomes kind of part of their everyday fabric to just kind of live in that kind of trauma, right? I think that's true. I think also there's this kind of like, there's this almost like what's the word? Like super overly ritualistic sort of aspect to this community, right? And you see how people can get into, the larger lesson, if you're going to take a lesson from a movie, is something like, well, if you're going to, start some kind of cult, the more ritualized and tribal and symbolized things are, right, down to the things people wear, the way all those weaved tapestries they have, right, and the kind of the look of the place and the kind of it's all, there's branding involved, right? And it's like there's a brand to Midsummer. Like if I say if you've seen Midsummer and somebody says Midsummer, you immediately you get that image of that laurel.
The Halloween costumes that year were just all
exactly. So
the May Queen and guy in a bear suit.
A guy in the bear suit, exactly. Oh, Jesus Christ. Good Lord. What is wrong with people?
How do you come up with this shit?
Seriously, that guy's demented. But yeah, that's a great one. I don't know if I'm going to go see it on IMAX, but...
Well, I mean, to the point about the tapestries and the symbolism of what's going on, when you see it in IMAX, you notice it so much more, and you can see how it's foreshadowing the events of the film.
Right. There's a destiny
and
sort of thing.
The whole movie takes place in daylight, pretty much.
Yeah, which is very amazing.
In the director's cut, there's one scene that's thrown in that wasn't in the original cut, which takes place at night.
Interesting.
And I can see why.
I wonder if that's the reason why he took it out. Because it was
it felt a little redundant, but not that it was a bad scene at all, but it didn't need to be there.
Right.
As long as Midsummer is the original cut, it's fairly economical.
Yeah.
So anyway, terrific.
Good. Cool. That's a good one. All right. And will we have anything else to talk about?
Not.
I got nothing to say.
Really? What if let's watch some TV shows. Nothing. Watched a bit of The Bear.
I'd like to see the second half of The Bear.
Watched a bit of Reservation Dogs.
I'm a little tired of TV. I'm having trouble watching too much TV. I was trying to see how directors work with, play material, so I rewatched Glengarry Glen Ross, and that's such a good movie. Yeah. It's the performances are so good. Like they're
the best ensemble.
It's delicious. Delicious. It's just like
Jack Lemmon.
Oh,
wow.
But everybody, like all of Kevin Spacey is great. He's great in it. But
Pacino
Al Pacino.
Do you remember he was nominated that year for 2 roles? He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Glengarry Glen Ross, and he was nominated for Best Actor
for Scent of a Woman. Oh, and he won for Scent of a Woman. Oh, the worst of all time. Yeah. I hate that movie.
Yeah. Anyway. Jonathan Pryce.
He's great.
Alec Baldwin in one scene.
Yeah. Steals the entire film, right? Put that coffee down. And Alan Arkin, who just passed away. So great in that. Ed Harris. Yeah, it's great. It's really amazing how movies that are kind of one set basically, or a couple of sets. I think it's James Foley who directed that one, and it's really, really
it's a David Mamet play.
It's a David Mamet play, which was a big hit on Broadway for like years before it became a movie, right? But the movie is just really, it's for anybody who's a filmmaker who wants to like look at how do you direct like a bunch of guys in a room, right?
Yeah.
This is a beautiful movie to look at, like it's really, the pacing is beautiful. Like it never feels slow. You never feel like, I need to see something outside of this. it's always most of the movie takes place at night. You know, there's this kind of rainy night, and then when it finally
so
is
shabby, The Office.
and yeah, it's shabby, but it's also kind of in a weird stylish kind of way. Like, you know, it's clean shabby, set shabby. But yeah, it's a great movie. I'm sure most people have seen it.
Mad Men does such an incredible job of, he's not really, I guess, doing much more, but these days, but this male-centered milieu that he lives in with, you know, House of Games, Glengarry Glen Ross, American Buffalo.
Yeah,
I mean, nobody does it like him.
No, I mean, he's a weird person because he's very right wing, and that bothers me. But he's a great writer. Like he comes out of that same sort of school as you know, maybe Edward Albee, and like a bit absurdist at first. You know, like he started out that way. Like Glengarry Glen Ross was a very odd kind of play. It's like, you know, a bunch of guys in a real estate office, right? But it's really more about like this kind of very competitive, hyper masculine world where there's no time for compassion, there's no time for feeling sorry for anybody.
So dysfunctional.
It's just like eat or be eaten, right? And there's something true about that, obviously, you know, about men, which I think gets missed a lot in, you know, in today's zeitgeist. Just the idea that, you know, men are shit, is you have to think about how men have been raised to be warriors and kind of winners and champs, and you can't, you know, you can't feel sorry for the guy next to you because it's about winning, right? So you have to you also
can't necessarily blame them all the time either, if this is the way
that you're raised. This is the, you know, and this goes back, like, if you wanted to go even back, and I think Glengarry Glen Ross touches on this, and this is what's fascinating, is it's like, it could be a barracks, you know what I mean? It could be a barracks full of soldiers,
right? You
know, it could be even in another time period. It could be during the Peloponnesian Wars. Who knows, right? Like these
ancient Rome.
It could be. This is a mythological kind of structure of men, and they talk about being men. Yeah. Right. Be a man, and it's the Jonathan Pryce character who's like cucked by his wife, right? Because he says, my wife won't let him sign the thing, right? It's like, my wife won't let me. And so there's this idea that this guy is got no dick, right? This guy's got no balls, right? And so it's a lot of, I find movies like that really interesting because there's something pathetic. And that's Jack Lemmon. He's like the pathetic now. Once great, probably once he was like Alec Baldwin or like Al Pacino, right? You know, just, you know,
hungry,
killing guys, you know, and just taking over their business, whatever, just like hungry. But now this is what happens to you, right? You become this washed up, old, you're done.
That world is not going to do you any favors. You can give everything you want to it, to an industry or a company or as a salesman.
If you're not winning for them, you're losing for everyone.
Yeah,
you know,
you're
out, and that's why it's so touching and sad and pathetic when he says, you know, the final thing he says is my daughter, right? When Kevin Spacey's going to turn him in, the final appeal is to something like compassion, and it's like, fuck you, right? And that's the cruel world that men create for each other and for themselves, right? And it's very difficult to break out of that, right? So I loved it. That was a recent one I watched. And I did watch Civil War, but you haven't seen it yet. So
I'll watch it this week.
So I want to watch it.
I
think you need to watch that one. We need to talk about it because, I think that one's a lot stronger than people are giving it credit for. So
I know a couple of people who loved it, but most people I know didn't like it.
I know why people don't like it, though, right? And it has a lot to do with the marketing. And this is an interesting conversation to have because we're both involved in filmmaking and, you know, in films.
And I'm a film distributor.
And you're a distributor, and you know about marketing.
Yeah.
And you know that they just it was false advertising on this movie because they marketed it as what you expect is some Trumpy type, look at, what's going to lead to our civil war, the right wing, the left wing, and these people are from the trailers and the kind of like the title, it does seem to kind of suggest that you're going to get this, you're going to get the reasons why civil war will happen. But you don't get that. What you get is after the Civil War has already happened, right?
It's interesting because A24, the studio, is probably the best marketers of feature films I've seen. Yeah. I mean,
they're great.
That's why they have such a cult following. Well, it's the choice of projects too.
But, I think with this one though, it was just so it was a no-brainer in terms of like, well, look at the current times we live in with all this talk about democracy's in danger and we're heading towards fascism and all that kind of stuff. True or not, I don't know, but it seems not good.
It's not good.
Yeah, so I would say that the movie did seem to be at least that's what I thought, and I thought it was going to suck. So I was going to watch it for fun. I just said to Ishmael, I said, let's just watch Civil War.
What did Ishmael think?
He also liked it. Okay. Because it was different. He didn't like it at first, but then, when he thought about it, we talked about it a bit and stuff, and then he was like, oh, yeah, that's true,
Well, we shouldn't talk about it too much, because we'll talk about it.
But just that's the thing I would say. The expectations that you might have of a movie like that one might get in the way of you. You might be thinking, well, this is a shitty version of the thing I was expecting. Right. Instead of, oh, wait a minute, it's not actually about that. So I would say what it's really about is, I'm not going to say. No, I'll wait till next time. I won't tell you what it's about. But next time I will tell you what it's about.
And so will I, because I'll have seen it.
Okay, so I think
anything
that's
else?
It. Anything else? Got a sore back. What do I do about that?
I don't know. I can't help you.
No?
No. You're old.
Are you sure you don't want to offer some kind
of
massage or
we're
something?
Done. We are done.
I'm taking off my clothes, okay?
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
I'm naked now.
I'll see you out there in the dark.
That's not my back.